So good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mark Smith, and it's my great pleasure to be acting as this afternoon's chair for the Hampshire Ambassadors Programme. This is the second of these meetings that we've held, and can I start by thanking everyone who is spending time with us this afternoon as we continue to build up to the launch event of the Hampshire Place Story, which we're aiming to have in May, and I shall come back to that at the end of the meeting. In broad terms, just to remind colleagues, because I'm aware some of you would have joined us for the first meeting back in November, that what we're aiming to do is there's never been a more important time for a particular region or area to be able to convey, particularly to the outside world, but also to internal audience as well, the story of that place and the great ambition that the place has, particularly as we aim to recover from COVID and build back better. Now, in a relatively informal way, the plan is to have an ambassadors network, and I hope many of you will be able to join us on that, and we'll be revealing at the launch meeting in May exactly how we're hoping the ambassadors network will work. But to be able to tell in a coherent way and from each of our perspectives what a great place Hampshire is and what an important role it plays not only in the south of England economy, but the greater UK economy. And much of that is through both making a coherent story out of the facts that this region clearly has in terms of its economy, but also through storytelling and narrative, because by that way, I think we can convince and tell the outside world how fantastic the region is and how many world-leading aspects there are to our economy, whether it be through business, the public sector or third sector, of which there are many contributors across the greater Hampshire region. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to hear from three of those businesses or institutions, and very much look forward to hearing from them. But we're also then going to build up to the meeting in May, where we will reveal the work that's been going on, sponsored by Hampshire County Council, to develop the place story for Hampshire. And having seen some of the exciting elements there are, I'm really looking forward to that meeting. There's been some slight change of personnel, and this meeting gives me a chance to pay tribute and also say thank you to David Fletcher, who was the Assistant Director of Economic Development for Hampshire County Council. Now, David has moved on to a similar role in a different region, and those of you that knew David can tell from his accent he's gone back closer to home. But I'm absolutely delighted to be able to introduce as our first speaker this afternoon his replacement, Richard Kenny, who is playing that role. Richard.
Thank you very much, Mark. Just to reiterate, really, that I'm actually David Fletcher's replacement, and taken over in terms of his role, and really pleased to land, at this time when so much of the foundations and good work has already been put in place in terms of the Hampshire 2050 project. Just by way of background, just to reiterate really why place is so important to me. I've previously worked on the regeneration of two major core cities, both Manchester and Birmingham, and I've also worked with the West Midlands on devolution, and in fact played a role in terms of developing the West Midlands combined authority, and I think many of you hopefully would agree that the West Midlands now speaks very coherently with one voice to government under Andy Street, and I think that's been something that was again referenced earlier on today by the Chancellor, and actually that was a place that had a history of I don't think they would mind me saying considerable fragmentation and dare I say it, some conflict, and they've really worked their way through that. To really sing from a single voice, and I think that's really important. I'd also just say that I've also worked in London and with Kensington and Chelsea on the Grenfell fire tragedy in terms of recovery, and also most recently and probably most relevant, worked as the Director of Growth, Environment and Planning in Lancashire County Council. In Lancashire, one of the things that I did was worked with all 15 local authorities across Lancashire, both the unitaries and all of the districts, and indeed the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership. And we worked together and pooled funding to produce something called the Greater Lancashire Plan. And that was founded on 3 cornerstones. It was founded on climate change, public reform, and the economy. And in relation to the economy, we did an independent economic review, and we appointed an independent panel that was supported and led by Sir Howard Bernstein, who I would describe as perhaps the father of the place. So that background, gives me some insight, I think, into different places and the way that different places work together. And I'd really want to emphasise that it really isn't about territory. It's actually about, collaboration and working together as different places, as all part of a bigger place. And I think it's really important that we, as Hampshire, as Pan Hampshire, pull together for its future. And this initiative, I think, will lay those foundations. It will tell in a very neutral way the story of Hampshire and all the great things that are going on in terms of all its different assets, both in terms of green innovation and in terms of international trade. And what a great day to host this event, the day in which Hampshire is recognised for its success in its Freeport bid. So really looking forward to working with you all on this great initiative, and hope to meet with you all in the future. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank you very much for introducing yourself, and likewise, we're great that you're on board. We're very pleased that you're on board with this project. It'll be great to work with you over the next period. And as you say, it couldn't be more of an auspicious day to be holding this event. It almost looks as though it's planned, but that would be overclaiming. But our first speaker couldn't be more appropriate, and I've been lucky enough to hear Alastair Welsh speak previously about the merits of the region, and a very strong and erudite advocate he is as regional director for ABP, and is going to talk about the importance of ports to the UK in general, and about this region in particular and where it's likely to go. So it's with a very great pleasure that I introduce our first speaker this afternoon, Alastair Welsh. Alastair.
Mark, thank you very much indeed for that welcome. And I think Rose is very kindly going to try to manage some slides for us if she can. So Rose, if you're up for it, let's go for, get the slides going. And can we go for the next slide, please? So all I was going to try to do was just to give you a flavour really about the port we have in Southampton today, really reinforce the role we play not just locally within Southampton and Hampshire, but right across the UK. And the picture you're looking at now, you can see part of our container port. You can see much of the western dock, in the distance on the left, the eastern dock, and across the water, the former military port, now commercial and military port at Marchwood, a large expanse of land, which we'll talk about more later. And then further down the distance, the refinery in Fawley, which of course is the UK's biggest oil refinery. And you can just about make out Aldred's chimney whilst it's still there, and you'll hear from Aldred later on. But essentially the port in Southampton has a key role to play within the UK, as well as an employer locally. We have a massive role to play in supporting the UK supply chain. And interesting to hear Howard Bernstein mentioned, and we've been working with Howard, with the landowners all across the area, as we look at the whole of the waterside area we're looking at now, so that for the long term, we're trying to understand what would the logical things be to do to make sure that we can plan properly and coherently for the next 20, 30, 40 years, to make sure that any development that happens in the area is properly planned, and actually something which, when we reflect in due course, we'll be very grateful that it's something we thought about properly first. But if you go to the next slide, just a bit more about the port in general. So in terms of the port in Southampton, we have 4 main trades today. Top left, the automotive side of things. We are the UK's biggest export port for manufactured goods. For automotive, we export around about £40 billion worth of manufactured goods from the UK every year, and we do still manufacture a lot. And of that, over 90% goes outside the EU. So we are truly the UK's gateway with the world beyond Europe. Top right, containers. We are the UK's 2nd biggest container port, which also makes us the 2nd biggest import port. Sadly, far too many of the containers that we send out from the UK are empty, and they come in with both raw materials and finished goods from the Far East and so on. We're the 2nd biggest container port in the UK. Bottom left, cruise. Today, when cruise is operating more normally, we are typically Europe's leading cruise port, the biggest turnaround cruise port in Europe, and we are truly significant on a global stage in terms of cruise. And more on cruise in a minute. And bottom right, just some random, what we call high and heavy, so manufactured goods that we have in the UK, as well as the typical cars, whether it's JCBs, whether it's tractors, whether it's combine harvesters, whether it's grading machines, whether it's coaches and buses and so on, that the range of things we make in the UK that comes to Southampton because we are where the UK meets the world's trading routes. And so the port we have here in Southampton, the role we play in Hampshire, really connects the UK economy with the rest of the world. We refer to ourselves as being the gateway to the world because truly that's what we see ourselves as being. Next slide. So of those various trades, one of our challenges is ships aren't getting any smaller. And so this is looking at a picture of one ship on Ocean Terminal, which was a very large ship about 7 years ago. And behind it, a ship that was an enormous ship about 5 years ago, just passing on its way down to the Western Dock. So one on the left around about 2,500 passengers, the one behind her about 4,000 passengers. So they used to be large. Of course, we laugh at those now. Next slide. Because this is typically a fairly large ship now. This was the new MSC Bellissima when she came to the port about 18 months ago on her inaugural voyage and was launched here, had her global welcome, was in Southampton. And we had people from all over the world who came to a rather impressive ceremony for her introduction. So she's got about 6,000 passenger capacity, but they're still getting bigger. And the challenge for us is today we are the only port in the UK that can accommodate vessels of this size. And as they get bigger, we continue to invest to make sure that we are the only place they can operate from when they come to the UK to support our position going forwards. And it's a major commitment, but we want to make sure that we do not surrender our cruise crown to other ports if we can help it. So cruise, the ships are getting bigger, and to handle that, that means we need to have both more and bigger facilities to support those within the port. Next slide. If we go on to the container side of things, challenge with containers, of course, is the container ships also are getting bigger. Container ships, when they first came out, might have had a few hundred containers on them. They have rapidly increased. I joined this port about 5 years ago, and I think we just had 18,000 TEU as our record-breaking ship. And they keep on raising in size. And the largest one we've had to date is just over 24,000 containers. And to give you an idea of scale, so that's twice the size of the new aircraft carriers that we've manufactured, we have operating out of Portsmouth. So the total volume of those ships, twice the size of the aircraft carriers. And if you think about what's under the water, that ship's got around about 16.5 meters under the water, as well as probably the same amount on top plus a bit. So these ships are truly large. And of course, the amount of space they need, both in quayside terms, but also in terms of the land behind them to support the activity we have, is very, very real. So containers getting busier, there's more of them, and the ships are larger. Next slide. We then think about the automotive side of things. As the space gets tighter and tighter, we have to find ways of creating space. And so we've essentially gone up. And we have now 9 car parks in the port, multi-story car parks, typically about 56,000 units on the port at any one time, export on the way out. And they'll typically be in the port for around about 10 days to 2 weeks as the cars come from the manufacturers, get themselves lined up to get on the ships to go around the world. we'll typically have something like on our itinerary list about 52 ports in 40 countries, and we are truly the hub for automotive. And so people will bring cars maybe made in the States, heading off to Russia. They'll connect them through the port here as the various ships come and go and pick them up and let them go as they go. So we have a critical role to play, not just to help UK manufacturers get their products to market as quickly as they can, but also to help the hub effect, to make sure that if you're in, let's say, Northern Ireland making aircraft support kit, you send your product here to connect with international markets. If you're Caterpillar in Northumberland making your great big yellow machinery for supporting road building and so on, 85% of what you make comes straight to Southampton to connect with the world. We are where you send your product to get out to the world. And that's the key role that we play, which is increasingly recognized in government as we look to see how we can continue to support what we hope is growing activity in the UK. But we truly are the UK's biggest export port. Next slide. So as we go on to think about the various trades we have, that the challenge, of course, is as we get busier and we get bigger, we absolutely recognise that the environment and the role it plays for all of us in our everyday lives, we'd be totally wrong to ignore that. And it's always a bit strange because people say, what are you doing about this? Well, of course, it's in our own interest because we all live either in Southampton or close to Southampton, and it's in our interest because we work here to make sure that the place is being looked after properly and we continue to improve the air quality that we have in the area. And just some examples in terms of vehicles, over half of the fleet that we have of our vehicles in the port are now wholly electric, and that will continue to increase over the next 2 to 3 years. With solar panels, by the end of this year, the majority of power that we consume in the port will be created on the port with solar panels on a whole range of buildings we have within the port. And critically, the first UK installation of shore power for commercial vessels will be in place by the end of this year. So the rather strange picture you have on the left there is not a giant cow milking machine. It's actually a large shore power connector, and essentially it's a really great big plug that you stick onto the, you connect the ship with the shore, and we then have a very large power supply to support ships when they're in port, so they no longer need to burn their own fuel in port, and we connect that up to the grid, and the power that we buy, of course, is renewable. So we have a number of things we're doing on port, but also to support ships. And shipping itself is improving all the time, with ships which are powered with LNG, some ships which operate with solar power in port, and so on. And as we measure the emissions we have, whether it's NOx or SOx or particulates and so on in the port, we have a whole host of measuring equipment right across the port, 8 different sets of locations where we measure emissions and so on. And we are very significantly ahead of where we need to be in terms of our not only European requirements, but also the City Council's targets. So we're doing a good job, but there's always more to be done. So environment is a key thing for us. It isn't going to go away, and we never want to stop because we always have work to do to improve it. But I think as a port, we are in a pretty strong place compared with many others, and we want to continue to improve on that. Next slide. And as we look to the long-term future and what that means for the port, if we just think about some of the trends as we project things roughly out to 2050 or so, and of course, any forecast, we know they're going to be wrong, but in terms of the range of what we see, with containers, our current capacity, we think, is about 2.3 million containers a year. And as we go out to 2030, 40, 50, we see the demand on any scenario being significantly more than that. The challenge for us is how can we handle a greater volume of containers? And we think that'll probably be on no more ships, but the ships that we have will become larger. So it's how do we handle the greater number of containers? In terms of the cruise side of things, we believe that the cruise volume will be doubling over the next 20 years. It's grown very significantly in the last 20 years, and we think it'll grow very significantly more over the next 10 to 20 years. And the ships that are currently in production and currently joining the fleets, notwithstanding the current pause we have globally, gives us a huge amount of confidence in the growth of cruise. And we're preparing for that now because we want to make sure the ships that are in production can operate from this port and not others, given the competitive nature of the world that we're in. And it's probably worth mentioning that with cruise, realistically, our competition for cruise is absolutely Miami, it's Fort Lauderdale, it's Barcelona, and it's the Gold Coast in Australia. Competition for containers, which is an import story, it is London Gateway and Felixstowe. Only 3 ports in the UK can take the largest ships. And then for automotive, for hubbing, our competitors are very straightforward. It's Bremerhaven and it's Zeebrugge in Europe. And as we look at automotive, we think that's where the most variation is in our long-term forecast. And the reason for the variation in automotive is simply because with the UK and the Brexit arrangements, essentially by 2027, the local content has to be at a certain level to avoid tariff into the EU. And given the speed with which we're going to go to electric vehicles, the UK will need to be generating batteries within the UK, making batteries in the UK for electric vehicles before 27 to allow the car industry to really grow going forwards. And we're watching that very carefully and working with the government and manufacturers to make sure we can support that so that as a nation, we continue making cars and we continue exporting cars. And we're trying to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place that we need to make sure we can support that and it happens successfully. Next slide. Which takes us then, I think, to the growth story and where we're trying to be. So we know we're looking into a growing demand for number of containers, a growing demand for the amount of cruise activity. We're looking at how we support automotive in a changing world, but also the other sector we have, our bulks sector, that'll continue operating within the port as it is today broadly. So where do we grow this and how do we grow it? And what we're saying, and this is trying to be a picture of the, as you look at it, on the right, top right, the eastern dock, heading across the western dock, and then on the left-hand side, the container port. And that totals around about 700 acres. The cruise activity we see growing in the current central docks, the eastern dock and the western dock, and we see that growing over the next 5 to 10 years with additional cruise facilities. The container port we see growing in the location of the current container port as we progressively hand over more space to the handling of containers within that part of the port. With automotive, we are reaching the point where we probably can't build many more car parks because we haven't got much more space. And so what we're doing then, as part of the work that was mentioned earlier with Howard Bernstein, but also the landowners right down the waterside from the power station with Aldred through to the old power station, through to the refinery at Forley, the military port, now commercial and military port in Marchwood, and also a large holding we have of land, is we're trying to see how might we responsibly develop that over the next 10, 20 years. And so we are looking from an automotive point of view at what the case is and what the benefits would be of relocating much of our automotive activity to the land that we have across the water in due course. That's something we're not going to be doing tomorrow, but it's something which we're planning for the long term as we look out to the period to 2050. And so I think final slide, just to give you an indication of the extent of our ambition and the pace we're trying to move. I mentioned cruise and our desire to support cruise and the future of cruise. And about 18 months ago, we put some plans together, which you see on the right-hand side there, for a new cruise terminal in the port, which would be a world-leading large cruise terminal to support the largest cruise ships planned and operating in the world today. And having committed as a business to deliver that, and with the support of the Solent LEP, and to be fair, the government's getting building funds during this Corona challenging period, we got on with building this building. And the picture on the left-hand side, you get a feeling for where it's at now. And that building will open this summer and will be operating passengers through that new cruise terminal this summer. That's around about a £60 million investment as we plan for the future in cruise as part of our planned investment to support the growth and activity in the port. And what is really helpful today, of course, is the Chancellor this afternoon announced that the bid for the Solent Freeport, which is the Freeport in which supports Southampton and also the port in Portsmouth and Forley Waterside, and the power station in the refinery in Fawley, as well as the Solent Gateway site. All of these form part of the Solent Freeport. And whilst always the devil's in the detail, we are very keen to be progressing at speed with further development in the area as we capitalise on what we think the Freeport could bring for us all. So I think we're in a strong position now. The work that we do within the port supports not just the local area, not just Hampshire, but supports the whole UK economy. And what we want to be doing is making sure we're really supporting what will be further growth in the UK economy over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So that's what I was going to say. I think I'm just over time, so I'll leave it at that, Mark. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Alistair, for that fantastic contribution. And no, there could be no better illustration of the real scale and ambition that this region has, and also the role it plays within the greater UK economy. So thank you very much for that kick-off of this meeting. Next, we're going to move on to Sarah Duckering, who's the Director of Research and Innovation Services at the University of Portsmouth. And of course, the whole way the economy of the region fits together means that innovation, the regional aspects of innovation, whether that comes out of business or other actors, is really important. And of course, the universities, of which there are several across the Greater Hampshire region, are there to play an absolutely central, whether it be the Russell Group universities such as mine at Southampton, or some of the other universities such as Portsmouth. And Sarah's going to give us a flavour of the role that innovation can play and the role of the universities in that. So Sarah, please.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that introduction. I am just going to share my screen. There we go. So delighted to be given the opportunity to talk to you all this afternoon and to talk about the role of universities. I've been involved in the Hampshire Ambassador Programme from the very outset. And so I'm really excited to see how it's progressing and where it's going to get to. So for most of us, universities are recognised as institutions of education, offering up the opportunity to study in depth a subject that interests us or enables us to pursue our dreams, and are a rite of passage for many of our children. And not until I started working at the University of Portsmouth did I realise there are other roles: to perform research discovery, to work with other organisations to enhance and exploit our knowledge and facilities, and to act as anchor institutions to enrich the economic, social and cultural life of our regions. For example, did you know that according to an independent assessment, the economic impact of the Solent universities alone was 4.2 billion GVA, and including in that 2.1 billion and around 33,000 jobs in the Solent area, which I think is quite astounding. So what about the University of Portsmouth? Well, our mission is to create, share and apply knowledge to make a difference to individuals and society. We recognise that we cannot do this on our own, and working with our community, whether they be current or prospective students, members of the public, companies, government bodies or other education providers, we need to work in partnership to ensure we achieve our goals. I just have to say at this point, I love my job. And that is because I get to work with the people behind these great projects that are all being delivered at the University of Portsmouth. I was told I only had a short time, so I had to choose the examples I share with you this afternoon carefully. And like John, I'm a bit of a storyteller, and I think the stories speak for themselves. As this is a Hampshire Ambassadors event, I've selected those that make me proud of the place I live and work, and create opportunities to showcase the region to a global audience and benefit our wider Hampshire community. There are many, many more to share with you, and my colleagues in all the other universities and research institutes in this region all have great stories of their own. Indeed, some of the projects I have highlighted here involve working with researchers from our neighbouring universities. I'm going to start with our plastic enzyme discovery. In true research style, our colleagues, led by Professor John McGeehan and working in collaboration with colleagues in the US's Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab, were analysing enzymes that they'd recovered from a waste recycling plant in Japan to identify and characterise them to improve our understanding of how the material world could learn from the natural world. What they discovered was a naturally occurring enzyme that digested PET plastics one of the most commonly used plastics, by breaking the structural bonds of its components and returning it to its constituent parts. Although we are all, I'm sure, excellent at sorting our recycling and placing our plastic bottles in the green bin, the current recycling process degrades the plastic each time it is remanufactured, creating lower quality materials each time. This new approach, by breaking the PET down into its building blocks, means that new plastic can be manufactured that is the same quality as the original, therefore making it truly recyclable. The team has since discovered a new enzyme cocktail which can digest plastic up to 6 times faster. The Centre for Enzyme Innovation is a unique facility as it combines scientific expertise in discovery and design phases, and the team, with support from Research England, the university and the Solent Lab, have created an environment where they can combine their own expertise to deploy and apply these new technologies. But the current next step for the team is to work with industrial collaborators to find a way to develop these technologies on an industrial scale so that we can achieve our ambition of having a real impact on society. Meanwhile, they're also working through their store of other enzymes, looking for other clues from nature that can help us solve some of our global problems beyond PET. The problem of plastic pollution is behind another big project being led by the university. Revolution Plastics is an exciting call to arms to make a difference to our city and region. Together, we want to transform Portsmouth into a global showcase for how to achieve a sustainable plastics future. We're working with a number of community organisations, and over 285 members of the community joined the launch event last year. All share the ambition to make a difference to the plastic waste in the city. No one party will have all the answers, but through working together, the aim is to develop and test solutions to reduce it. The visitor economy makes a vital contribution to the wealth of our region. Dr. Preston in our Institute of Marine Sciences used her expertise to stabilise the remains of King Henry VIII's warship, the Mary Rose. It was producing tons of sulphuric acid due to the oxidation of iron and sulphur in the wood and bolts after being exposed to air again. The acid was eating away at the ship and had to be stopped. And Dr. Preston used her DNA expertise to discover iron oxidising bacteria in the wood, she then spent months using gene sequencing technologies to establish mechanisms to stop them and preserve them. And the Mary Rose is a great asset for the city of Portsmouth. Staying on this theme of protecting our heritage, Dr. Preston is also leading a Solent oyster restoration project in collaboration with the Blue Marine Foundation, 1851 Trust, MDL Marinas, INEOS, and UK Oyster Fisheries. Oysters are the ocean's kidneys. A single oyster filters up to 200 litres of seawater a day, removing pollutants and keeping the surrounding water clean for other sea life to thrive. This project aims to provide an evidence-based strategy and cutting-edge restoration science to restore a healthy reef ecosystem. It also aims to restore the oyster's role in lifting and sustaining ecosystem health, increasing biodiversity and improving water quality. The early findings from this research are positive, and the team is consulting with marinas across the country to help them become involved in oyster restoration. The university is passionate about tackling the global climate emergency and has published its commitment to being climate positive by 2030. Its research and innovation activity is crucial to achieving this ambition. Our research into intelligent transport systems is one way that we are delivering this. Professor Jamila Wichard is heading our work on operation optimization, which applies mathematical modeling to scenarios to develop efficiencies and improvements. She's just started working on a project on behalf of all the local authorities to develop sustainable transport solutions to reduce private car usage, making travel journeys easier, smarter, and greener, enabling residents to make informed personal choices. Her group is also investigating the environmental impacts of freight movement within the Solent area and will develop innovative and sustainable approaches to urban logistics, reducing the impact that goods movement has on congestion, air quality, safety, and journey times. They've also been trialling new sustainable solutions for freight distribution, including the UK's first drone delivery trial for the NHS to move medical supplies between 3 hospitals in Hampshire, Southampton General, QA in Portsmouth, and St Mary's on the Isle of Wight. This particular project was fast-tracked so that urgent medical supplies and equipment could be delivered as part of our response to COVID-19. The role of research at universities has become apparent as we all respond and adapt to life during a pandemic. At the University of Portsmouth, we've been involved in a multitude of ways, whilst also pivoting our entire business to being online. Our scientists have been helping with genome sequencing, which helps identify the new variants. Our business and law faculty have been supporting the small business community with advice clinics, surveying the needs to influence a raft of measures to address these, including access to funding. We also used our experience in commercial law and design to create laser cut face shields that we provided for our local police, fire, NHS, and other frontline social care workers. Each year, 6,000 graduates process through the Portsmouth Guildhall, celebrating their success in completing their studies, whether at undergraduate or postgraduate level, and embarking upon their careers. But we need to encourage these people to stay and establish their careers in our region. We as universities need to ensure that we equip our graduates with the skills and knowledge that business tell us they need, which is what we strive to do. But we also need businesses to have the right opportunities for them, to encourage them to stay in the region by offering them the opportunities to develop their careers in sectors and industries with high quality jobs with growth potential. The Hampshire community needs to work together to create the right opportunities and environment to build this quality of place and experience that we can all benefit from. We also need to recognise that this generation is different. We need to build a community of entrepreneurs and to recognise that the route to success is not determined solely by a traditional degree pathway. We need to build entrepreneurial mindsets into all our students. And we also need to play our part in creating an innovation ecosystem in our region. We must work together to put in place the infrastructure that is needed to support this ecosystem, the innovation centres, the access to knowledge and support structures, including finance that it needs to thrive. This is an area of significant growth and opportunity for our region. We have many of the building blocks in place, but we need to work harder on bringing these together, joining the dots and avoiding duplication and confusing. At the University of Portsmouth, we're launching Innovation Connect, which is our response to how we see our role in supporting this vital innovation community and using our relationships, facilities, expertise and connections to support them, because there's massive growth opportunity. It's not all green grass and blue skies thinking though. We need to become even more successful at bringing in government funding to support our research and innovation activity, to help organisations work with us to make a difference to society, and in turn, to encourage more organisations to invest in the region to help create the high quality jobs and opportunities we want for our future workforce. We must avoid complacency. We risk being a region left behind if we cannot demonstrate some coherence of vision, agree a way forward and work together to achieve something incredible that will make a difference not only our region, but will have significance for UK PLC. The announcement from Rishi Sunak on the Solent Freeport is a great platform to start from, but it is only the start. Clearly, through this process, we've been able to articulate the power of our region, and to secure the ultimate benefits, we're going to have to work hard and fast. We are still waiting to hear when the next round of Strength in Places funding is being launched. So far, this fund for place-based activity has invested 186 million in innovation-led opportunities for regions, and nothing in our region. We need to grasp this opportunity to make sure that we benefit from this in the next round. So let's take the ideas from the Freeport and build our innovation capacity to bring new companies into our region, creating jobs and delivering new products and services that address global challenges. Working from home has reinforced to me what a wonderful place we live in, but we need to come together to demonstrate to key stakeholders, including those in central government and global investors, that investing in this region will deliver a significant economic and social return. I hope this presentation makes you feel proud of the university and the region we work, live and play in. And if you want any more information or any of the project that I've mentioned today, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
So Sarah, thank you very much for that not overview, because as you said, you had to make some difficult choices of picking some inspiring examples of the research and innovation that goes on at Portsmouth, and indeed you did that and illustrated perfectly the key role that universities play in a whole range of areas, such as helping upskill the workforce, develop CPD for businesses, and of course, research and innovation. But you also set several challenges for us there. And I think this is the whole point of, or one of the points of the Ambassador Programme, is to rise to those challenges, because there is a danger that people will think, okay, those people down in Hampshire are okay when they're developing their plans for investment at government level. But we absolutely need some of that investment, and making sure we get our fair share, I think, is really important. But we can't take any complacent view that just expect it to come. We have to keep making the case. And that's one of the things that we will do. And another challenge that you set us is that this is a region where students who come, get educated here, then see this for all of the fantastic facilities we have as a region they want to develop their life and bring up their families. And that neatly leads us on to our final presentation this afternoon, which is from Audra Drummond, who's the Chief Executive of Fawley Waterside, with the exciting project down there to look at how we live differently and how we live better tomorrow, and play a very important role in making this region attractive for people indeed to develop their lives and families here. So Audra, can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Mark. If I could have the slide deck up, please. Thank you, Rose. And the next slide, please. But I think we relish the challenge, Sarah. I think we relish the challenge. This is a very exciting region, and Hampshire is somewhere I love deeply and have been here all my life. I'm glad to see government has also recognised Hampshire and hasn't taken all the Freeport good news to the north. So despite the fact that we seem to have life fairly good down here, there are isolated pockets of problems. But I think the big message, and one Alistair has always been very keen to trumpet, is one that, you know, Southampton and its area really does play a very big part in the national story. And that's something I'd like to pick up on too. So here is Fawley Waterside, the old power station site, the largest brownfield site in southern England, and formerly the largest oil-fired power station. So it's rather a nice transformation that we are planning to turn it into one of the most beautiful small towns in England, but one with solid economic purpose. And you can see back into the New Forest there and up into the eastern parts of the White and down to the Needles at the west of the White. So it really is a spectacular location. Next slide, please. What we're planning is a proper town, and one with real economic purpose, and one I hope, Sarah, will encourage and attract some of your students to come and work here, as well as yours, Mark, and we've often had discussions about that. It's a place where there are to be circa 2,000 homes and over 2,500 jobs, and I hope that I can increase that jobs level quite significantly over time. This is about £1 billion development, over £1 billion development, and will include many of the services that people need for their day-to-day lives. So proper little beautiful towns, the way we like to consider it. Next slide, please. This is an impression of the planning permission that is now received, and you can clearly see the relationship with the Fawley Oil Refinery to the north, which is the where the oil comes into the dock there. You've got the Hamble River across the water. And you can see the three distinct areas of the town and the importance that employment and economic purpose have in these plans for here, for Hampshire and for the waterside. With the northern quarter there, which is dedicated to marine activities and technology. And I think it's one of those points I'd like to dwell on, is that the waterside really has been a petrochemical heartland for the last 70 years. As Alistair said, we have the second largest refinery in Europe and the largest refinery in England. But those jobs are no longer there in the same numbers, even though the refinery is still producing as much fuel products as it ever did. The numbers of local jobs have declined quite significantly. And the power station itself used to employ about 750 people, and that's down to about 100 now who work in the wind turbine blade industry, interestingly enough. And so what has happened is that the local population has had to look elsewhere for jobs, and we have a major out commuting problem. There's about 10,000+ trips out of the waterside every day. And this is really the regenerative purpose of Fawley Waterside, is to create a beautiful town, but one with, as I say, real economic purpose, where we can rebalance the waterside, we can take pressure off the A326, and we can address some of those points of deprivation that do exist. There are 2 housing estates in the bottom decile of deprivation nationally. I'm a governor of the local school, local secondary school, and we've got 500 pupils where there used to be 1,000. We've got the same number of pupils on free school meals, but they've doubled in proportion as the number of school pupils has declined by 1/2. So there are some isolated hotspots of deprivation that need dealing with, and by bringing economic vitality back into this part of Hampshire, we can achieve that. Next slide, please. How are we going to do it? We've got this concept called the intelligent merchant city, and that's building on some of the great strengths that we have in this part of Hampshire. There's great strengths in the technology sector, and also a great deal of investment. And there's great strengths, as Alistair explained, in the marine activities, and that is part of the Freeport bid, and all of the 20% of the area's GVA is focused on maritime. It's an intensely important sector for the waterside, for Southampton and for the Solent area. Next slide, please. This is the master plan, and you can see a bit more detail about the marine yards and the business area to the north, the heart of town, which is a high density, vibrant port town, and then the suburb to the south, surrounded by 250 acres of parkland and environmental areas. And again, Sarah, we are taking our environmental credentials extremely seriously. We're within a national park, we're within a very heavily protected coastline. And so, and I'll come on to it in a second, the strive for net zero and leaving as low an environmental footprint as we possibly can is absolutely paramount in these plans. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is looking east. So we're on the southern quayside, we've got a hotel and apartment buildings around what will be the harbour area. Next slide, please. This is looking down south towards that southern quayside, and you can see the sort of height and scale of the buildings. One of the most remarkable things, and part of the regeneration story of the power station, it's got the largest unsupported basement in Europe. You can put 2,500 cars underground. You've got 7 kilometers of underground tunnels, which you can drive cars around if you so wish. And you've also got the room to put in this canal, which gives us access up to the marine yards, which are planned for the northern quarter. Next slide, please. Digital intelligence. We're on a bit of digital intelligence at the moment, and we are planning for Europe's first smart town. We've been in partnership in what we call the Core Technology Group with IBM, Vodafone, Cisco, Siemens, and the University of Southampton, planning for what would be the benefits of a smart town. What does that actually mean? What are the attributes? How does it benefit the residents? How does it benefit tenants? How do you reduce costs? How do you improve environmental credibility? All of these matters are being enabled by the digital transformation. To actually measure and manage is so important. Next slide, please. Sustainable intelligence. This was touched on in some remarkable slides you showed, Sarah, of the work that Portsmouth University is doing. As I said, we're in a national park. And I think what I'd just like to say is the first part of our plan is to reduce energy use. That's the town is walkable. The buildings are designed to be of a height where staircases are as useful as lifts, though of course you will need lifts. And that goods and services, mixed use, so goods and services for most of your needs are available within walking distance. The last 70 years has really seen, the planning system has almost created unsustainable places where you've had great swathes of residential or specific areas for commercial zones or retail or industrial. And we're trying to mix this up and create a genuine mixed use place. Next slide, please. Collective intelligence, the great universities of Southampton, of Solent, of Portsmouth, and the wider members of the UCRIC club that we're involved with, the core technology group, as I mentioned, government support. You know, we do live in an area of extreme richness. The marine activities and the marine institutions that are around the Solent, the research centres, are just, you know, in a league of their own. And as the more we've researched into this, we've been mining this very rich scene of marine and technology. And the Freeport bid, I believe, will just spur that on and encourage people to come and locate and invest in this area. Next slide, please. As I said, we've been focused on two particular themes, not to the exclusion of other economic themes, of having a marine and innovation focused business cluster, to cluster firms. And we're beginning to talk to firms. We received our planning consent in July, some world leading businesses that want to cluster here because of this theme and that the access to all of the other great resource that we have in this region. It really is tremendously exciting, the participation and interest we're getting from some global firms now. Next slide, please. The COVID crisis has had enormous problems, created enormous problems, but there has been some changes that make places like Hampshire more attractive. You know, people are looking to move out of the metropolitan areas. They're able to work from home. They're able to have a better quality of family life. And this is, you know, this is some statistics and paper cuttings from the property press about the number of people looking to move out of town. And that will play to new towns that plan and integrate and create services and jobs for people to actually, as I said, have 80% of their daily needs serviced by the towns that they live in. So I think this is an exciting opportunity for the future. Next slide, please. There's tremendous investment. As Alistair said, we were involved in the Waterside Prospectus, which Sir Howard Bernstein led. And the mantra was £200 million worth of government investment would potentially unlock £4 billion worth of private sector investment, which if you add all of these up and add the £1.5 billion for Fawley Waterside comes to £4 billion. So that's a tremendous, it's the sort of Heseltine multiplier. £1 in, £20 back. So the Waterside is going to undergo an unprecedented level of development, and we just need to make sure that that is sustainable and has a low environmental footprint. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Transport connectivity, tremendously important. As said, we have a lot of people migrating out of the Waterside at the moment, and there does need to be improvements to the A326. And I'm hoping now with the large local majors project for the A326 improvements will be given a boost by the Freeport announcement today. I'm also aware that the County Council has submitted an outline business case for the reopening of the Waterside Railway. So let's hope DfT look favourably upon that and give us funds to reopen that line that was closed in 1966, but is still operated till very recently as a freight line, as indeed it still does, into the military port. So we have, I think, again, an unprecedented amount of investment has been going on into this part of Hampshire, 700 million committed into local roads infrastructure on the A34, the M3, the M27 smart motorway. And then we need to look beyond that into the future for autonomous taxis, water taxis, and perhaps even drones. That will be an exciting thing to think about in the future. Next slide, please. As said, the County Council have submitted a bid to, or a business case to reopen the railway line. It's something we're extremely keen on. And despite the lower levels of patronage now due to COVID, I think this will build back up very, very quickly. And more people are wanting to look for alternative ways to travel rather than just jump in a private car. And with the infrastructure there, this is one of the easiest lines to open in the UK. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the timeline for the development of Fawley is to complete the planning work over the next couple of months, to complete demolition. The chimney is still there, but it might not be there for much longer. We're looking to demolish it in about September or October, start infrastructure development in 2021, and then proper construction will start in 2022. And there's about a 15-year development program. That could be longer because there's other bits of land where the substation is that could come forward for development as a next phase in the future. Next slide, please. And here you can see the phasing plan with the large environmental areas are going in up front so that new residents won't look out and think that they're living in the Somme. That will all be done early. The road infrastructure will be put in early, and I'm delighted to say that the SLEP Park, the Solent Local Enterprise Partnership, part-funded road improvements to the A326 south of the Dibden roundabout will start soon. We've also had some money from the Get Building Fund to majorly upgrade the fibre network into a super fast fibre highway, which actually splices into the New York-London fibre highway. So the Waterside will be one of the most connected places in Britain shortly. Thank you very much, Mark. That's the end of my presentation.
So, Aldred, thank you again for another one of the major projects, which I think illustrates the excitement there is in this region. One of the things that we're keen on in these ambassador events is to keep to time. And thanks to all the colleagues who've contributed this afternoon who have done that splendidly. So quality and on time, what more could you want? But just to close, looking at the chat line, just that there are two questions which I think I should note. The first is, we are consciously aware of this is, and I've kept emphasizing it in my kind of introductory comments about this is a Greater Hampshire project. It's about the whole of Hampshire. And we are aware that the north of the region plays a key role as well. And when we come to the launch event, we are on the 17th of May, we're absolutely going to make sure that the breadth of the region is reflected well, and it absolutely is core to this project. That's point one. And the second point is, how do you get involved as ambassadors? That will be also part of the launch event, because we're very conscious that there's been very significant interest in these ambassador meetings. Now we need to hand over to you and tell you how you can help us, and we will be doing that at the launch event on the 17th of May. So with that, so that we're almost exactly on time, can I thank all of our speakers again for such splendid presentations. Can I also thank the people behind the scenes who made this work, because it's easy to take that for granted, and I certainly don't take that for granted. So the colleagues that stitched this all together and organised it, many, many thanks for that. But most particularly, can I thank all colleagues who have joined us throughout this hour. I know how valuable time is as a commodity. So the fact that you've chosen to spend it, I hope you felt it was valuable. I was really excited and enthused by the talks. And please note that in your diary for the 17th of May, 11 to 12:15. We were hanging on to hope that we could do a real in-person event. However, it's much more important we formally launch the place story than wait for the ideal scenario. So we are absolutely going to launch it in May. Please put that date in your diary and join us, and then we can continue to tell this very exciting and fantastic story of this region, to make sure this region maximizes its impact. So with that, I'll say good night, and again, thank you very much for your attendance.